Anti-racism, diversity, inclusivity, don't know what to do, tough conversations. That is what this episode is about. You guys know that I don't shy away from sharing how I feel about things and also ways that this applies and impacts your business. This episode is great because I have a social media strategist who is coming on board to help us walk through navigating these tough discussions and giving you some guidance on how to manage this time and making a plan of action going forward in your business.
Welcome to the Business Bites Podcast, the podcast for busy entrepreneurs. Whether you're an online entrepreneur or seeking after brick and mortar success, this podcast brings you quick bites of content so you can learn and grow anywhere you are. Now here's your host, Rachel Brainke.
Hey guys, before we get into the episode, I wanted to talk about two things real quick. First, don't forget that Eden Law is having $500 off trademark applications through the end of June 2020. Eden-law.com. The second thing is, this episode, I am talking with Kia from the Social Crown. We are going to get into the tough discussions of including racial discussions, inclusivity, diversity, and these major national conversations that are happening right now in our world and how that fits into your business brand. I'm also going to be linking on the show notes page, rachelbranke.com/EPI126, a list of anti-racism resources and other great resources for you to check out. Jump over to the show notes page, click through the resources, consume the content, apply it to your business. I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to episode 126 of the Business Bites podcast. I am your host, Rachel Brainke, and today I'm joined with one of my favorite people in the industry, Kia Young. She is a social strategist and mentor who doesn't just love helping business owners, but she's obsessed with helping them focus on #what matters most. The goal is to build a thriving online community that converts. I love her agency, The Social Crown, because it supports service-based businesses, personal brands, and nonprofits internationally. I also love her because she's a fellow military spouse. They currently live in Maryland, and I hope she stays there so we can meet up for crab cakes soon. She also has a big family like me and loves puppies and loves tacos. So Kia, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And I have great news. We are settling in Maryland. So
Woo-woo! We'll have to meet up soon.
Well, thanks for having me, Rachel. I'm super excited to talk about this and talk with you.
Yeah, I'm so happy to connect with you. I had the pleasure of speaking at a conference/retreat that Kia is a head of, along with it's the Make Her retreat for military spouses. We did it last fall and it was incredible. It was one of the most well done resources. And I think I even told you there that I wish that had been available when I was first starting out in business 15 years ago. And it would have been really nice to have that. And so, of course, obviously, I've always looked to you for social strategy and also asking tough questions about diversity. And right now, we all know that there is a lot of talk going on. There's a lot of impassioned feelings online. And I wanted to bring you on to talk about how to speak out during current climates and tough situations. Before we get to that, though, let's just introduce how you got into this and kind of your story, and then we'll dig into the meat of the topic.
Yeah, so I officially quit corporate America back in 2012 on a whim. So that wasn't even in the cards for me. My husband was deployed and realized that I was not valued where I was. And I missed my kids. Like I saw them, I saw them like an hour in the morning and a couple hours before they had to go to bed at night. And with him being deployed, and some things happened at work where I was like, I think that I'm just going to chart my own path. And that was kind of solidified that summer when he came home. And I realized we took a 2-week vacation. And I realized I would have never been able to do that if I were still, employed in corporate America. And I kind of made the decision then that I never wanted to have to ask permission to be with the people who mattered most to me and do the things that mattered most to me. So my journey of entrepreneurship looked a little different after that. I was a top leader with a direct sales company. Then I did some freelance writing. And one of my writing clients asked me to take over their social media because she just noticed that I could really get conversations started just on my personal.
Mhm.
And she's like, "You need to take this over for me." I was like, "Really? That's a thing?" And she paid me for it. And when that contract was over, she was like, "You really should consider starting your own social media business." And I was like, "That is a thing?" And she's like, "It's a thing." So and she told me that, and a week later, I launched the Social Crown. I got my first client on the day that I announced the business, and it's just been a fun ride ever since then. So it's been the perfect culmination of all the things that I love. You use my favorite word, which is obsessed, and I really am obsessed with like community and connection and like real authentic. Like I can't stand like surface conversations or anything that
Mhm.
just feels like very tepid. So this is just my jam, and I love getting into the psyche around what makes people take action. And so this is just kind of like the perfect storm of all the things that I'm obsessed with. So there you go.
Well, I love how you talk about, you want to do things that make people take action, but it's not just standing on the top of social media and yelling for action. You inspire a lot of action just by what you post on your own personal social media. We're friends on Facebook, and I get inspired just because of the way that you uplift the community around you. And so I can see all the things that other people are doing, and that's an inspirational to me. Like, I don't need a huge call all the time,
Right.
but the consistent output of that and showing how you're a champion for community
Yeah.
really is a good way, I think, to drive action. So I love that not only are you putting out this content, especially this article that we're going to talk about here in a second, about speaking out about major issues, but even just when there's not quote unquote, major issues that are being slammed and going along, but just the consistent uplifting of community is really encouraging.
Well, thanks. I try. That's what I try to do. You gotta talk the talk and walk the walk if you're gonna be a social strategist, right?
Right. Well, and that's a good segue because one of the things, and you and I know we've had conversations. I have come to you before, and I may have not been perfect in being an ally, but I've always been trying. And I think this episode really is, I want to give a platform and ways for entrepreneurs to speak out, especially now when exactly what you said in this article. And I'll link this for you guys at rachelbranke.com/EPI126. It's also at kiayoung.com, but it's 3 ways to speak out. And you said by choosing silence, make no mistake, you are hurting your business. Do you want to expand a little bit on that? And as far as, I'll let you expand, then I'll follow up with some questions.
Yeah. So, when we take on being an entrepreneur or being a leader, you're taking on the responsibility to teach, for people to have access to you, and
Mm,
they start to expect things from you as someone that they have trusted, to be a leader, to add value to their lives. So when you build a community, we do have a responsibility to show up, and people are waiting to see how they react. That's the definition of being an influencer, and
mhm,
entrepreneurs can be influencers and vice versa. So if you served your community, and I always feel like if they know your heart and they know where you stand, um, and you've kind of tested and tried all the things, grace kind of lives there. So
mhm,
if you've built that authentic community, we're going to disappoint them in some way, shape, or form. But because grace lives there, because you've shown up as your full self, and they expect that from you, it's harder to walk away from, and it's harder for people to say, I'm never going to do business with you again, or I can't, I can no longer follow you because you have been authentic this whole time.
mhm,
So that saying that you teach people how to treat you goes for entrepreneurship too. Like we have taught them what to expect from us. So to go silent at that time when they're
mm,
used to you speaking on the things that
mm.
matter, you're showing them exactly what matters to you. And being silent right now is showing your true colors.
And one of the things that I've kind of struggled with is that I've been super vocal on my personal social media, right? And I've
Mhm.
kind of always had this old school mentality of that politics, personal preferences over, I mean, we're talking deep personal preferences and
Right.
allyship, not like I like decaf coffee over regular coffee.
Right.
Always kind of was taught that that wasn't to be publicly discussed. And so, and as a people pleaser, you just said you're always going to disappoint somebody, and my heart goes, because I want to please everyone. And I think that it's hard, but it's not. I hope I can communicate this properly and that my heart's in a good place with this, is that it is hard to break, not even just now, but in any climate. I think it's hard to break from this conditioning that I feel like
Mhm.
um, we are been taught, and even I think even more so 5-10 years ago on social media, where everything was supposed to be neutral, everything was supposed to be happy go lucky. So for me, that's something I have fought with, and I've especially fought that recently when I've had people challenge me, because I've stood up. I'm like, screw it, you know what, you don't like what I stand for, whatever. But I've had people ask me, how does this even fit, what does this have to do with your business? What do you say to someone that asks that question?
Yeah, so who, especially on the service-based business side, right? Like in having a personal brand, part of that is who you are. Like
Mhm.
they do business with you, they could choose a ton of different attorneys. They choose you because they like Rachel. And that's a huge part of building a community. So it has a lot to do with it, especially if you're on the service-based side. People being authentic and true to who you are is just a natural continuation with businesses. So it has a lot to do with it. But even more than that, this whole conversation around race itself is just uncomfortable, period. But I think
Mhm.
people have, because it's uncomfortable, people have lumped it into, oh, it's political. But it's not
Yeah.
politics. This
No,
is
not at all.
just like your neighbor. This is
Mhm.
people and humans, and that is not political. So
No.
I think because, and I've been thinking about this a lot. I feel like this conversation is at a boiling point, but it's something that we've been gravitating toward much
Mhm.
longer than the last couple of weeks. I mean,
Agreed.
I would even say that it started during the 2008 presidential election around the topic of a national conversation around race,
Mhm.
right? And so we're at this boiling point, but it's always been an uncomfortable topic. And I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I think it's more uncomfortable for white people
100%. 100%.
because you've been conditioned, as you said, just you don't talk about it. You don't see race, you
Mhm.
don't talk about it. On the flip side, for people of color, black people in particular, I mean, we start talking about race from the very beginning with our children.
You live
So
it.
it's
Mhm.
been a community conversation between us, and social media has kind of forced us to have this conversation, and it's uncomfortable on both sides, and all sides it's
Mhm.
uncomfortable. But I always say that, like, and I'm sure you've heard this and thought this as an entrepreneur and a leader yourself, that the most magical things happen outside of your comfort zone. And
Mhm.
so even past last week, I'm already starting to see some really beautiful things happen on the other side of this conversation. Well, we're still having it, but even now, just a week later, a few days later,
Mhm.
some really great things are coming from it. And I think if we tap into that uncomfortableness, just like we tell leaders to do, that it's gonna be uncomfortable and you have to kind of just work through it. It's the same concept.
Mhm, mhm. And one of the things that I love about this, and you kind of, I think, snuck this in a little bit ago, is that this is very defining of who you are. And
Mhm.
that honestly, and I think you and I even had this conversation maybe at the retreat, is that I was already feeling a little lost in my identity online.
Mhm.
And I realized, because I wasn't really truly speaking out with who I was. I was trying to walk that tightrope of appeasing everybody. And, I had even done a post a couple weeks ago, and I was calling out other white industry leaders, because I
Mhm.
was like, y'all, I'm standing up. Y'all need to stand up. Yes, maybe because I'd
Yeah.
feel a bit more comfortable too. But, selfishly, we always want, people to stand up with us. But just like you said, I feel like this is a conversation that has been needed to be done. And I, I am encouraged, and I hope that you feel the same way, and I hope that it continues, that perhaps that social media really can gravitate more towards a really true authentic. We kind of throw around the word authentic, but
Mhm.
how many are really putting their authentic self out there? Because if you had asked me a year ago, I'd have been like, yeah, Kia, I'm authentic. But was I really digging into who I was online?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I think that word authentic is hard for people because we hear it and we know we're supposed to be it, but nobody really talks about what that actually means to be authentic.
Mhm.
And then there's this kind of pull on, if you're authentic, you're going to lose followers. But I like to make a case for your followers don't necessarily equal your community, right? So
Mhm.
your community is something completely different. Those are the people who are going to show up for you, who are giving you referrals, who believe, they're raving fans, they're obsessed with you,
Mhm.
right? That's your community. They're reading all your emails, they're listening to your podcast. Those are your people. And guess what? They are only your people because they already know you.
Mhm.
They already know you. So however you show up and how you have been showing up, they have this expectation of you kind of continuing the same, or at least being super true to who you are. And so it's not a huge pivot for them. So losing followers doesn't necessarily mean that you've lost your community, because chances are your
They weren't your
community.
community to begin with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
I posted a big old peace out to people that had sent me negative stuff the other day. I was like, I just don't give up
Right.
anymore.
Right, and you can't. And the truth is, like, Ben and Jerry's is a great example of this, right? Like, so they have always been down. They have always been very vocal about Black Lives Matter and any kind of what's considered controversial topics.
Oh, they went in to burn this to the
Oh,
ground.
but they always have, right? They always
Yeah, yeah.
been that. And so the people who, didn't know that about Ben and Jerry's, I don't know how, they're like, oh, we're done, we're boycott, whatever, we're not going to do it.
Where you been?
But the people who
Yeah.
loved it or who were exposed to it didn't know that. Oh, I saw everyone. I'm only buying Ben and Jerry's now. So just because you have repelled the people that aren't your people, that can still be a good thing. Like,
Mhm.
you could still have and maybe even be better positioned, right, to repel the people that aren't your people, that shouldn't be here, and make room for your voice to actually get out to the people that it's meant to get out to. Because honestly, having a bunch of followers who aren't engaging with your content, guess what, that's actually damaging your brand anyway. If we want to get down to the technical parts of social media and how the algorithm works, like, you
Mhm.
want to get rid of those people who've just been casually following you but never engaging in your content. So being able to say something that makes them make a choice of, like, yes, Rachel thinks how I think, and I'm all in her community, or no, this is not for me. It's actually a really good thing. So don't be afraid of that, because you're building your true community. And usually that will convert better for you, if we want to talk about business, than having a whole bunch of people who aren't really your people.
I mean, hello, lower ad spend, but
Yeah.
even just from like outside the business aspect, I mean, that's kind of something that I've really had my heart awakened to through a lot of traumatic events I've had in the last just 6 months.
Hmm.
That I I mean, I will say I was given the platform. Not that I didn't have to work for it, but for me, like within the last few weeks, is like if I'm not going to stand up, I'm going to do a couple of things. One, I'm going to waste the platform that I have,
Hmm.
and two, it's going to exactly what you talked about in the article. And this is the quote: "Would you rather tell them and show them explicitly what they need to know about you, or give them space to make their own assumptions? As a social strategist, trust me, you don't want them to make their own assumption,"
You do
which is
not.
totally true.
Right. When you give people the space to decide who you are is when we really get into disappointment, right? Because they have created this figure that is probably an impossible standard to live up to anyway.
Mhm.
So being able to say emphatically, this is who I am, and leave no room for confusion is always a good thing.
And one thing that I was thinking about as I was preparing for this episode is even going into this, I was like, Kia knows me, Kia knows my heart, but how tough do I want the conversation to be? And then that leads me into thinking of, well, I mean, I honestly feel, whatever, I'm going to put this out there, whether we edit this or not, you and I can talk about it off the
Yeah.
air. I feel like a lot of white industry leaders like myself are unsure how to take the next steps and speak out, right? Like they can buy in, they hear, we don't want assumptions, we want to know what your heart is, we want to be authentic, but we don't know which way is up sometimes. And like one hand of me is like, well, I'm not gonna, obviously don't want to put that burden on my Black friends.
Mhm.
And the other side is, but there's like 500 bazillion articles out there that are all competing.
Right.
And of course, me in Rachel fashion, I'm like, okay, I'll do what I do. But then it also circles back to I want to do what's right, not because I know my perspective is tainted
Right.
a bit, right? It is washed a bit. So, what would your recommendation be for those that are like, okay, I'm on board, Kia, let's take these assumptions off the table. I want to speak out, but
Yeah.
how do I do this correctly?
Yeah. So the first step is deciding how you want to speak out, and so that would go into like the three types of ways to speak out. But and we'll get into that. But I think the most natural, organic thing to do right now is to be truthful. So this is your moment to be authentic of, okay, I am reconciling this within myself, right? I
Mhm.
found out some things about myself that I didn't like. It's ugly. I'm embarrassed by it. I'm committing to do better. I am
Mhm.
also going to take the time to make sure that I do this right. So what I can tell you is this. I'm com- I, I recognize that this is where I am. I am committed to
Mhm.
changing that behavior. And I'm
Mhm.
committed to, you know, surrounding myself in an environment where I can learn more, absorb more. And this isn't something that I can send a document out and or an email out in 2 days and saying this is what I'm going to do. This is a constant life
Mhm.
commitment for me right now. So it's going to ebb and flow, and it's going to look different depending on what's happening. So I think that what I saw on my side was a lot of people working really fast to tell us all the things that they were doing, and I could not cringe more last
Oh,
week.
girl, I'm
Um,
sorry.
and only don't be sorry because
I'm sorry. I'm apologizing for all people who can't figure this out right
well, and
now.
I also know so like, everyone was doing reconciling last week. So I also realized that I have to step away from like judging and really
Mm.
look at it at like what is the heart behind this? And then also my commitment is to watching you. So if you've told me that you're going to do these things, okay, like in 2022 I still expect to see those things.
I just got
Um,
chills when you said that.
right.
No, but it's true. Like that's kind of been my thing is I put a poll on Twitter and I asked, are you going to choose to buy or not buy from a company based on putting them out a corporate statement? And actually majority of people said no, that wouldn't make a difference, but the follow-up comments were exactly what you just said. It was about identifying the actions that would be consistent after that.
Right, right. I got a lot of people saying that they were going to create scholarships, and you might edit this out, and it doesn't matter to me, but just on the real. Um, and to me, that was the one thing that made me cringe most, right? They're
Mhm.
like, we're creating these scholarships for Black women. And I'm like, guys, like, I get it. Like, you want to do something quick, but we are also not charity. That is not what this
Mhm.
is about. I
Mhm.
can afford to buy your course, your product, whatever. You're going to have to earn me buying it. Like you putting out a
Mhm.
scholarship is not going to change everything. And it also, we start getting into like the white savior. Oh,
That's
I'm just
exactly what I was gonna ask. Yep.
right. Yeah. And so, but my commitment was when I saw that to go to those influencers, those entrepreneurs and say, hey, I see you trying to do great, think about this. Like and
Mhm.
you might decide to still go with it. That is your business. I just want to give you like some insight on how reading that you're creating a scholarship after 24 hours of this national conversation on race for Black women comes across as really just, oh, I'm doing some charity work
Mhm.
instead of
Mhm.
doing the real work of or continuing work. So, and I had some really great conversations from some people that I already admired and respected. So we'll see where it goes. But I do know, again, going back to when you have served your community, Grace lives there. So I know that they weren't doing it from a place of malice. and they thought
Mhm.
that it was the right thing, and maybe it is the right thing for them, and that's what they decide after a long um, taking some time to think about it. But uh, you have to, it's like a little minefield. You have to kind of be careful that you're not coming across as like trying to save the world. I had me and my friend had a good laugh because we kept seeing um, a lot of people saying, I want to share your voice with the world. And I thought, girl, I have more more followers than you. Like, what are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? Like, this is asking us to work together,
Mhm.
like truly work together. That's what this is about. This is not about you saving me or people that look like me.
Well, and that's the thing is like, you keep saying this phrase of like national conversation. And so it almost makes it sound like it's one conversation, but it's not. It's like an umbrella of like a menagerie of conversations.
Yeah.
And, what you're talking about is I've seen direct conflicts in groups. I mean, Facebook groups are imploding
Uh,
because you have, I mean, think about it. It's not like all white people and all black people got together in their own conventions and decided, okay, this is how we're going to help. This is what we're going to do. Everyone's a different person. So the way that you would take something, someone else may not take that,
exactly.
and the way that I may convey something, someone else may convey it a different way. So that's why I love that you keep circling around grace. And, maybe it's a little too late for some people, at least right now, in
Mhm.
that they may not have provided some authenticity
Right.
before this, but now's a good time to really start moving forward with it. And I mean, because I know I've had big pushbacks of not even people like upset that I'm bringing the narrative of Black Lives Matter into my brand and everything, but their questions are like, how does this fit into your teachings? Well, for me, legal, it's kind of easy. I can come up with a variety of things,
Right.
but there are some industries or companies out there that, how would they answer that question? I mean, what would you advise them in that situation? I mean, I can see the answer, but I want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, and it was pretty interesting with me. Obviously, we have clients all on the service-based personal brand side, but still very different industries, right? From
Mhm.
travel and Disney to like to like copywriters, right? So it was interesting to just navigate from a professional standpoint. Okay, how do we do this? And so I really think I tried to relate it back, and that's why I ended up writing the piece because I had to sit down and be like, okay, how are my clients? How are we going to show up for my clients right now? And really, so if it doesn't, if it isn't a true fit, I think that's when that subtle speaking can come in.
Mm,
So the three ways I say that you can show up are as a bold speaker, as a subtle speaker, and I want to add a caveat to that, that subtle does not mean meek, or
mm,
it doesn't mean that what you're saying isn't powerful. It just is showing up in a very different way. And then the third way to show up is as a facilitator. And so
mm,
that bold speaker, most of the time it fits like perfectly, perfect puzzle piece into what you're doing. Just like you said, you're an attorney. Like it definitely makes sense for you to be talking about that. My Disney agency, not so much. Not so much. So it's about intersection. And so what I
mm,
try to do is figure out like where does what we do fit into this conversation, and
mhm,
what already exists, whether it's a quote, whether that can give us some inspiration of what to say and how to say it. So there's a lot of thought behind it, but it doesn't have to be that perfect puzzle piece for you,
mhm,
um, especially when at the end of the day we're all serving people. So there's
mhm,
no way that this conversation doesn't include you. Like it doesn't matter what you do unless you're not serving people. Um,
mhm.
and at the end of the day, like who's not serving a person on the other end of whatever transaction you have, whether it be service or product. And because this is a people issue, then everything fits.
Yes. That's why when people come at me with like, keep politics off, I'm like, this ain't politics. And I go on my whole rant. This is people, this is heart. And they never, hardly ever have have anything to say in return. Because how are you going to respond when you say it's a heart people issue?
Yeah, I mean that's a reconciliation moment for them, and I'm glad you say it because it's one of those uncomfortable things that we're not supposed to talk about. So they hear race and they lump it with politics, and so it has to be political, or religion, right? You're not supposed to talk about those things, but when you drill down to it just being a human, who can fight that? Who can argue with that?
Mm-hmm.
You can't.
Mm-hmm. So I want to circle back to what we were talking about, kind of seeing action. Obviously everyone's in like this sprint mode of, and I do believe, and I try to give a lot of people benefit of the doubt that it is in their heart. Either they've had a change of mind or if they're really wanting to step up. And, I've had my own introspection of how I could do more, and that's wonderful. But like looking forward, how would you advise people for their, in context of their social media? And I say strategy, but I don't really want to mean it like with the end result of gaining business. I really mean it in like putting their heart out there and putting a line in the sand of what they stand for. How would you suggest they start injecting this? Because I don't know. For me, I had always tried to include diversity, but I'm white. So my photos of myself are going to be white.
Yeah,
So I would try to use stock photos to show diversity. And I think you
yeah,
and I had this conversation. I was like, is this disingenuous
yeah.
for me to put a black girl here? Because it's normally my brand is me. And so are we talking like low key stuff like that? Or what would you suggest social media strategy over the long term? Do you want to see more overt actions?
Yeah, so I think that it has to, whatever it is, it has to be organic, right? So
Right.
if you look back at your last 27 posts, if you're mainly showing you and your family and that's what your community is used to, don't just
Mm-hmm.
post a black person all of a sudden. Don't do that. But really find those areas where you can collaborate organically with someone
Mm-hmm.
color. So what might happen is your social media images might still look very close to what they look like right now. But who's on your podcast? When you're
Mm-hmm.
using stock photos in your blog posts, who are you what stock photos are you using? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like there are so many different ways when you have your next big collaboration, a project that you want to bring in another entrepreneur, with, like, who is that person? So it
Mm-hmm.
might not happen today. Like your social media feed might look a lot close, really close to what it looks like now. But
Mm-hmm.
if someone pushes back on you, you'll be able to say, "Well, I have this thing planned with this person, and I'm working my podcast was like 10." No, and I'm not using you as an example. I'm just saying my
You can if you need to.
has like, before it had like 10% women of color, and now I've intentionally made sure
Mhm,
that I include more women of color that are on my podcast. So it might look a little different and it might take some time for you to get there. I would rather you make a plan,
mhm,
start taking action that might not be performative. I might not be able to see it right now, but if I ask you a question, you can say, I'm doing this, this, and this, and that it's coming. Because, like I said, this is a long term commitment. And so,
mhm.
posting something this week that none of that is impressive. This is the long game. So, I
Let's say that again. Just because you posted a black square last Tuesday, that's not impressive.
Not at all. So I would just say start not necessarily thinking about this. And I know I'm a social strategist, but I also think about everything. So like your entire online digital footprint. What does that
Mhm,
look like? And making sure that it aligns. And so it's bigger than your social media, your Instagram feed. It is so much bigger than that. It is how
mhm,
you're choosing to do business, right?
mhm,
Who you are working with, who you're collaborating with, who are you elevating, and so that might not look so different today, tomorrow, next week, but over the long term, it will look different and it'll feel different too.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that I've noticed, I don't know if you've seen this from being in groups, is I'm finding that it's more white attacking white and trying to put the voice for my black, like speak for my black friends.
Mhm.
And I want to be like, white girls, sit down.
Absolutely.
Like, but at the same time, I'm here trying to speak up too. So I have to like remind myself and that it's, I guess for me, what I have been encouraging my fellow white influencers, industry leaders is provide the platform, obviously not in a tokenizing manner,
Right.
but like what you're talking about, like a long-term provision of platform over time and make that commitment to diversity. And because I feel like I've sat and thought about this a lot because I wanted to make sure that if I'm going to speak out, I also need to make sure I'm being effective and kind with the way I'm speaking out.
Mhm.
And honestly, I'm still learning in this, but I know for me, it's been a very, what's the statement? It's not enough to be against racism, you have to be anti-racist,
Yes.
and or to be not racist, you have to be anti-racist.
Right.
And like for me, that is kind of really what made me go, whoa. I felt like if you had asked me even a couple months ago, I'd have said, yeah, I'm injecting diversity into my, plan. And I've been doing that for years, but was I really truly being actively anti-racist when that is a core piece of who I am and when I want to project? And so that is a question that I want to put out for those that are listening that may whether and we say white industry leaders, but if you have social media and you have some followers, if you have friends, you have a platform.
Absolutely. For sure.
So use it.
For sure. Yeah. It's such a hard thing to navigate, but again, um it's so funny about what you were saying in groups and everybody just wanting to tear each other up on Black women's behalf. I don't know if you know many Black women, but we're pretty good at being able to
I know.
stand up and talk for ourselves. So but it has been, it's just a subtle navigation. Like it's you don't want to come off performative.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're something that I have learned is if you're too angry, no one can hear you, right? Because
So you're telling me to scale it back a little bit?
no, that's not what I'm
I'm just
saying. No,
kidding.
that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, like, if
Yeah.
everything's an argument, then nothing's an argument.
Well, it goes back to if this is really a hard issue, then speak with the heart.
Exactly. Absolutely. I mean, that's just as plain as it can get. And at the end of the day, we just want more education and for more people to understand. And it's
Mm-hmm.
hard to do that on social media, and it's even harder if you're coming at it from an angry place. I think
Mm-hmm.
I think when Black people are talking about racism, um, it can be off-putting and feel and you might feel shame around it, and so your first uh, action might be to get defensive.
Yeah.
And I think where our allies can step in is they might be more open to hearing it from you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's where allies can be helpful. Um, but at the end of the day, like we're all able to speak out for ourselves. We just want you to speak your truth, speak truth to power. And it doesn't have to be on my behalf specifically,
Mm-hmm.
just on the behalf of us all just trying to be good humans and raise good humans.
Mm-hmm. Which kind of brings us full circle to this whole like 3 ways to speak out. Like I said, I'm going to link this article. It's great that Kia put out, and obviously her social media services, especially during this time and going forward, because you guys are going to make your plans now after listening. She is a great person to provide some great strategic input, especially including anti-racism and diversity and inclusion into your social media marketing plan. But I would encourage that we've kind of just ended it on this whole, it is a hard issue. Encourage you not to look at this just as a business strategy thing, like, am I going to pacify my customers? Because as I've talked about on the podcast, and I always try to bring to the forefront, even though I talk about legal and marketing and all of this, at the end of the day, my business is so I can have a life. And
Mhm.
in the last few weeks, my eyes even been open is that I have a business so others can have a life too. And that doesn't mean like necessarily that you're live, but so that they
Right.
can have a life that they want, so that I can help to be a part of that. And I really think many people underestimate the way that you can do good through your business. You don't have to go open up a charity. You don't have to do a nonprofit. You don't have to get a bill passed. You still can do grassroots, ground floor change through social media postings.
Yes, you can. We just all witnessed it happen. So
And incredible. Well, Kia, thank you so much for your time. I know that you're extremely busy right now. And I mean, as always, you have done wonderful things. And I appreciate you being a wonderful friend to me, answering these tough questions for me. I hope that you guys listening really, really got some good knowledge out of this. What we're going to do is stick it to rachelbranke.com/EPI126 because it's episode 126. I'm going to link all of Kia's stuff there as well. Her Social Crown site, all of the links directly to how you can find her, a lot of great stuff. If you guys have any questions at all, please feel free to also jump into the Business Bites podcast group on Facebook. Obviously, this is a subject matter that is really important to business and life, so we are definitely going to have a thread dedicated to it. We would love to hear what you're doing to enact change in your business on these national conversations.
Thanks for joining Rachel on this episode of the Business Bites. For show notes, a list of recommended tools, or referenced episodes, you can find them at businessbitespodcast.com. Until next time.